Good morning and welcome. I'm Daphne Richards, Travis County Horticulture Agent with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Thank you for joining us for this webinar in our Waterwise Strategies for Austin Gardens series. We've got a great program lined up for you today, water conservation for Austin home landscapes today and tomorrow. As part of this program, our presenter may refer to various source material or websites. Don't panic if you don't catch those in time to write them down. All registrants will receive a follow-up email chock full of great stuff, including a link to the recorded session from today and links to any references or resources listed. Today, we'll be taking some questions when we break, as well as at the end of the program. To pose a question, you'll need to use the Q&A feature. Simply type in your question at any point and we'll address them at 3 times during our mid-program breaks and at the end. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can, and we'll follow up after the program on any that we run out of time for. Our presenter today is Kevin Kluge. Kevin is the Water Conservation Manager at Austin Water. He oversees a range of water conservation programs, including incentives, irrigation evaluations, commercial efficiency assessments, and water waste enforcement. Prior to his position with Austin Water, he spent 20 years with the Texas Water Development Board, culminating in the role of Director of Conservation and Innovative Water Technologies. Kevin holds a Master of Science in Natural Resource Utilization and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Welcome, Kevin. I'm excited to have you with us today. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Daphne. Good morning, everyone. Work to pull up my screen. It's great to be here with you today to talk about water and landscapes. Is that up? Are we good, Daphne?
Yes, that's great. Just put it into presenter mode and hit the road.
Okay. I did put it in presenter mode.
It may just be taking a second. Sometimes it takes a second. I can see that your mouse is there. So maybe click on that again, because I still see the
regular mode.
Yeah.
Are you still in regular mode, or do you see the presenter mode?
We're still in regular mode.
Oh, I thought we had.
We did.
Address
maybe
this
try it at the top. The top.
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, try from the menu, the slideshow menu at the top. Yeah.
Okay.
And then go from beginning on the left. Yeah,
Okay.
try that.
How about now? No,
No,
still.
so let's try this. Stop sharing and then start sharing again. Let's try that.
All right. Stop sharing. Sorry about this, folks.
We've had that problem with others, so it's not unique to you.
Screen share. All right. And now the PowerPoint is up, and you still see the
Edit mode.
edit mode. All right, let me try one more thing here. Let's close that. Stop share.
No matter how many times we practice, an issue usually pops up.
Do you see it now?
I
In
don't see
presenter mode or regular mode?
I don't
Not at all.
see your screen at all.
Oh, okay.
So like Kevin, try going back into Windows and making sure that your display is on duplicate. Again, it might have reverted.
Right. Yes, it did for some reason.
Yeah, thank you, Microsoft.
Changes. All right, how about now?
Nope, no screen at all.
So yeah, so hit share screen.
Okay. There we go. Now do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, and now hit that
Yay!
All right, very good. Well, thank you much.
All right, trial by fire is ended. Now, take it
Very
away.
good. And it's still great to be here with you today to talk about landscapes and water. So I'm really glad to be here and to talk more about this. The agenda today is pretty basic. As Daphne mentioned, after each one of the first three agenda items, we'll take a pause and ask questions. If I can't answer the questions during this webinar, I'll certainly get back to you, or I'll refer you to some of our other experts in water conservation. As was mentioned in the title, I really wanted to talk today about a number of things. One, today's water, today's landscaping, but also today's water situation. As all of you know, and I'm hoping you're in a cool spot, May was one of the hottest months on record for Mays. So it is starting out a pretty hot and dry summer. So I wanted to give a brief description of the water situation today, and then talk about today's landscape water conservation within the Austin area, and then tomorrow's landscape irrigation. We have a number of things going on in Austin water that will affect landscape irrigation in the future. So today's water. This is some information from the Texas Water Development Board and a map from the U.S. Drought Monitor showing the extent of hydrological drought across Texas. And you may have seen this, but if you haven't before, red means dry. And the darker the red, the drier those areas in the state of Texas are. Now, this looks really bad. It wasn't as bad as October 2011, if you were around in the area back then, in which the entire state was dark red. But it's not, it's not that bad. But there are some areas in the state that are not in drought, and some that are very much in drought. I would point out, I'll try to use a little laser pointer here. Travis County is right here in the middle, and you can see Travis County generally goes from abnormally dry in the east to even some drought, even extreme drought in the west. And that, of course, is concerning for all. But I want you to also note what it looks like to the west of Travis County, where it's all extreme drought or exceptional drought. Austin, City of Austin, and many of the water utilities in the area receive their water from the Highland Lakes, from two of the Highland Lakes, Lake Buchanan and Lake Travis. And the combined storage of both Lake Travis and Lake Buchanan is roughly 1,380,000 acre feet. And if you're not familiar with what an acre foot is, it's, as the name implies, it's 1 acre of land filled up with 1 foot of water. Essentially 326,000 gallons of water. And that's often enough to supply 4 households with water throughout a year. So there's still quite a bit of water in that, but they are down to 69% of the total storage capacity. Travis is even lower, down to 61%, and Buchanan is higher. So the lakes are at a low level, which should always be a concern for residents of Austin. But one of the things I want to make you aware of, and many people in Austin aware of, is that while the lakes are low and we should be concerned, there's still quite a bit of water in there, roughly 70% of water in the 2 lakes. But what this graph shows is the volume of water flowing into the Highland Lakes. And on the bars, the vertical bars there are the volumes over time throughout a year. The light blue bars on the left, light blue bars show the average volume flowing into the Highland Lakes from 1942 when they start this to present. So this whole time, this is the average. And you see that they're relatively high. They're certainly higher than the other ones. And certainly in May is always the wettest month, or generally the wettest month of the year, and then follow up with June. So those historical inflows are pretty high. Just to the right of that light blue is a dark blue bar. And that's the average between 2008 and 2015. That's really the last really dry period in Austin, kind of the last really tough drought that we've had. And you can see that those inflows into the Highland Lakes certainly are lower than the historical average, the total average. But one of the things that is interesting and should have people's attention is the gold colored bar. That's the inflows in 2021. That's the third one across. And you can see that those were significantly lower than both the historical average and the last dry year average. But for May, we had some really big rains in May and June, some good inflow into the lakes. But generally, 2021 inflow was lower, certainly lower than the historical average and lower than that last dry year period, or dry time between 2008 and 2015. So that really reduces how much is going in and allows the lakes to keep filling up. 2022 is shown in there with the green bar there, and that's the far right for each month. And you can see that in the first 5 months of 2022, the inflows into the Highland Lakes continued to be low and even lower than they were last year. And you can see in May, which was historically the highest inflow month, and still had quite a bit in our last dry period, our May was very low in terms of inflows. So the lakes are just not filling up as much as they have been historically. Now, the LCRA, Lower Colorado River Authority, they own and manage the reservoirs. And they put out projections regarding the reservoirs and how much water that they will have. This graph is a projection that they developed June 1st, beginning this month. And the vertical axis shows the volume, the storage volume, and the horizontal axis shows time. And from the left-hand side, which is back in June 2021, up to the gold vertical bar, yellow vertical bar, that historical storage volume has stayed really roughly between 1.5 and 1.6 million acre feet. Now, there's a historical dash line there, and that's showing the 1.4 million acre feet, which is the trigger for stage 1 drought restrictions for the city of Austin. You can see that it's over time, the storage, that dark blue line, has been slowly going down. And we did reach that 1.4 million acre feet a number of days ago. And if you've been watching the news, you saw in the newspaper that, or other media, that these drought 1 restrictions started on Monday. Now, going forward, as you see in the graph, the future arrow going forward to the right of the yellow bar, you see a number of different projections. The green one, the dash green one on top, wet projections. The dash blue one is median conditions in terms of weather and rainfall. And then you have the orange dry conditions and the red extremely dry conditions. You can see if somehow the weather turns around and we get green, we'll come back out by December, back to that 1.4 million acre feet. But the yellow and red continue down through the end of the year, ending just above 0.9 million acre feet, or 900,000 acre feet, which is actually the trigger for stage 2 drought restrictions. So the projections from LCRA show the lakes continuing to go down throughout the rest of the year. Just some other projections for the next 3 months. These are from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. These are projections for temperature outlook and precipitation outlook. If you focus on the left one, the left figure there, you see Texas kind of between the orange and the red in terms of temperature outlook for the rest of the year. You can't exactly pick out Travis County, but it is probably just to the right of that orange line, the orange area, with leaning above temperature outlook. And certainly this week, with our string of near 100 or above 100 temperatures, it's not hard to imagine that there's a likelihood of being above average temperature outlook. You know, it's been tough this week, and it looks like it'll be tough going forward throughout the rest of the summer in terms of temperature. But even into that orange area, now that's the watershed, as I mentioned before. That's under extreme drought and severe drought. That's the area that collects the water that comes into the lakes, that provides that inflow. So again, and then if you look over to the right-hand side on the precipitation outlook, Austin may be in that white area where there's equal chances of precipitation, above average precipitation or below average precipitation. But much of our watershed is probably in that khaki tan area, in which there is leaning towards below average precipitation. So both of these could be, spell trouble for Austin, Central Texas going forward in the rest of the summer. So as I mentioned, just kind of wrap up this discussion on today's water. Austin Water has gone into their stage 1 drought restrictions when the reservoirs went down to 1.4 million acre feet of storage. Now that's the bad news, as you would say. If you're going to have any good news, the good news is that Austin is a very environmentally conscious community and is very forward-leaning in terms of regular conservation measures. So year-round, even without these drought stages, we have a lot of regulations regarding the use of water, to limit the use of water in our daily lives throughout the year. So moving to stage 1 doesn't have a lot of additional restrictions. All that it really does is that for automatic irrigation system users, typically in our usual conservation stage, they can water from 7 p.m. in the evening to midnight, and then from midnight to 10 a.m. When we move to stage 1, it just decreases that time in the morning. So instead of watering until 10 a.m., you can only water to 8 a.m. with the idea being that it reduces watering in those 2 hours, which has higher chance of evaporation. So it's just a slight reduction in the amount of watering in the mornings for residential customers and commercial customers, anyone who uses automatic irrigation. But moving to stage 1 does allow us to bring to the attention of the Austin community just where we are in terms of our water supply. And throughout the summer, we'll increase some enforcement of watering restrictions. Between that and education and just general outreach, that's really where the value of the stage 1 designation comes in. A few things to note just on this slide on the bottom there. If you're curious on those tree irrigation and handheld hoses, drip irrigation, athletic fields, are still exempt. Those can be still water. So with that, move over to questions. I know threw a lot of information out there. So if there are any questions, we can handle these now. And as I'm sure Daphne would say, if you don't get the questions in this time, you can still ask the same questions, in the next question rounds.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So if you have a question, anyone, type it in the Q&A box. We'll pose a few now, and then we'll get to the rest as we go along. But type them in at any point, and we'll hold them there until it's question time. So you don't have to wait until question time to type them in. But before we move back into your presentation, Kevin, I want to stop and just point out that you're talking about today's water, the situation on the ground today. And one of the questions that I had moving into your last slide was, and you did a pretty good job explaining it, but after our last really long, very prolific drought that we had, Austin Water came up with, what I kind of considered or called to myself permanent restrictions. And I don't know what those were named. So now that you had the slide up that said stage 1 and explained what stage 1 was, the stage where we just moved into on Monday, and how that restricts the timing a little bit, with a little less time in the morning, later morning, to water because of those evaporative features. It's brighter earlier in the morning now. What was that previous stage called, that kind of permanent restrictions? What was the name of that?
The name of that year-round permanent was simply the water conservation stage.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, that was really established back in 2016 when we were coming out of stage 2, when it was really, the lakes were really low and things were really tough. The community and utility realized going to a 1-day-a-week automatic irrigation schedule really had a lot of savings. And that's where the city and community decided, as you mentioned, to keep that 1 day a week for irrigation systems. So you're saving water all year round, even when we aren't in drought.
That's a very good point. And so, when we think about watering plants, we do, from the plant's perspective, like to point out that it's better for plants to receive water in the morning because of disease issue potentials with the environment, with that ability for some water to evaporate off the leaves instead of sitting on the leaves all night. So some of that's a good thing, especially for turf grass with with an overhead sprinkler irrigation system. But with a drip system, if you've got that under some mulch or something, you can preserve water even in those later morning times. But another thing I want to point out about our weather is that it's been extra windy this year. It's been, especially the mornings, and we used to think about the morning as a pretty calm time before the wind started. But this year, it just seems like the wind won't let up. And that also increases evaporation with overhead sprinkler or, a turf irrigation system. Okay, we do have a couple of questions here. We'll maybe have time for one. Do sprinkler heads fitted with drip manifolds still fall into the drip irrigation allowance category? So I guess if you've retrofitted the system from sprinkler to drip, is that considered drip or sprinkler?
Yes, systems that have been retrofitted from spray heads to the drip are considered drip irrigation.
That's a very good point. And then I think we'll let you go back to your presentation.
All right, very good. Okay, as I mentioned, it's been pretty hot and dry so far, and it promises to be pretty hot and dry for the rest of the summer, as you might imagine. So the question is, what can we do to keep our plants adequately watered and stay within the watering restrictions that we have within our community? Austin Water Conservation Division has a number of different rebate or incentives that we offer both Austin Water customers, but also Austin Water sells wholesale water to some districts around the city. So even if you aren't in Austin Water, you may receive water from one of these districts and eligible for all of these programs. So just even if you aren't in Austin Water, don't necessarily think that you're losing out on taking advantage of these systems. Take a look at which district you're in, and if you wanted to contact us for more clarification, we can certainly help you. But this next section, I wanted to go through a number of these different programs that we have here at Austin Water to help residents save water and to help their landscape. Conserving our water and landscape can be done a number of different ways, using more rainwater or gray water, designing a water-wise landscape, maintaining your landscape, and maintaining your irrigation systems. And we have rebate programs for all four of these different types of ways to save water in your landscape. The first one I want to talk about is our most popular program, and that's the rainwater harvesting rebate. Austin Water has been doing rainwater harvesting, supporting rainwater harvesting for quite a while, 10, 20 years, I think. In the past, we would sell rain barrels ourselves that residents could come and pick up, but we no longer do that. Rather, we offer a rebate for rain barrels purchased by customers or qualifying customers of other water districts. We have two rebate amounts. One, 50 cents per gallon for the non-pressurized systems. Those are the barrels that you see in the picture, or other barrels that individuals, residents usually purchase. But you can also qualify a rebate for $1 a gallon for pressurized systems. These are the much larger tanks, generally metal tanks that are used with a pump, 500 gallons or more, with a $5,000 maximum rebate, up to 50% of the project. So our rebates can help pay for 50% of the rain barrel. As I mentioned, in terms of the rebate, rain barrels, 500 gallons or less, you can purchase that and then submit a report to us, or the receipt to us rather, within 30 days for reimbursement. Systems over 500 gallons, the large tanks, what we ask is that before you purchase this, the tanks and all the equipment, to send us a drawing so that we can have an idea of what's being done and offer some approval prior to submitting that, in case there are any things with the system that may not be possible under our system. And you can apply them once a year. So you could buy one tank 1 year, another tank the next year. And we've had a number of residents who take advantage of this system and submit an application once a year to really fill out their storage capacity for rain that can be used. And with more storage, there's more opportunities to water the landscape around your house. So rainwater harvesting is certainly one way to collect water from that naturally falls from the sky. And one of the things I didn't mention in those slides is that one may think, why do we collect rainwater? We're in a drought, it's not going to rain. Actually, even in the toughest times in the droughts, there is occasional rain. And so collecting that and using that as best you can is a great idea. The second program I want to move on to is the Waterwise Landscape Rebate. This is really a rebate program for people who want to convert their lawns to beds with native plants. As you see up on the slide, replacing healthy turf grass with native beds. And you get $35 for every 100 square feet that is converted from turf to beds. You can't have turf replacements, so you can't replace your Bermuda grass with St. Augustine or any other type of grass. We want you to convert it to a bed that will use less water. And we cannot use this rebate for artificial turf or gravel scapes. So you see the picture above and kind of what we're thinking. Some of the eligibility, as I mentioned, Austin Water residential customer or customer of a qualifying water provider, some of the districts around our area that we sell water to. The size of the conversion area is 500 square feet. We include that just to make sure that it's worth going through the process, not only for the customer, but also for us and for water savings. So minimum of 500 square feet. We need you to be accepted into the program before you do all the work. So please, if you're interested in this, talk to one of our specialists or myself, and I can put you in touch with our Waterwise landscape specialist to talk through the plan that needs to be submitted before you do it. So that then we can include you in the program. And as mentioned on the bottom, it needs to be turf grass currently. A few of the other requirements in this Waterwise landscape program, the plants need to be from the Grow Green plant guide, which is very popular, even regardless of our rebate program here. This is a great guide for landscaping. If there is an existing sprinkler system in the lawn, you don't have to tear it up when you tear up the grass, but they do need to be capped off or converted, as someone asked before, to drip or bubblers in those areas in which there's conversion. Plant beds need to have mulch also. And just a few last things. Conversion area needs to be comprised of over 50% plant cover at maturity. So as you might imagine, you'd want it to fill out and not just be a complete sheet of mulch. You want the plants to thrive in that area, and anyone who's going to do this will want plants to thrive. I mentioned before, no gravelscapes. What that meant was no complete covering of gravel. You can, within these areas that are being converted through this program, you can have gravel paths, and you can have a gravel patio area, as you see in that picture down there. 200 square feet maximum, but there is opportunity to use some areas for gravel within this converted landscape. The third program I wanted to mention is similar to the Waterwise landscape, but it's called Waterwise Rainscape. This is a program which provides rebates to individuals who want to convert their current landscape to rain gardens or similar types of landscaping there. You see $30 per square foot for converting these landscape features. Now, the benefit of rain gardens and these different types of rain gardens that you see there is that when it does rain, similar to the rainwater collection systems or barrels, when it does rain, water will run off, and you want to make the most use of it on your area, on your property that you can. So these rainscapes are generally shallow depressions in which rainwater will flow and will hold water rather than having to just flow off your lawn onto the sidewalk or into the street or what have you. It will collect this water, and plants in those depressed areas will be able to utilize that collected water. Eligibility for these rainscapes. Again, Austin Water customers or qualifying water providers. Conversion area, 100 square foot minimum, and have not started the work. Some of the different types of areas that could be used in this Waterwise landscape program include rain gardens. You see there, as I mentioned, those are depressed areas that will collect the water that you see coming off the right in that photo on the upper left-hand side. You see a house to the upper right corner. Water will be flowing off that house and will be collected into this depressed area and holding the water and allow plants to use. Similarly, you can have berms These are just low curved raised areas that collect the water, allow water to slowly infiltrate into the ground. Swales, these are broad, shallow channels people can install into their landscape. Again, it reduces the flow, the velocity of the flow, allows some of it to hold the water and water plants. And it also, like all of these, with water not flowing directly into the street, it helps the water quality of the community, in which any chemicals from the lawn or anything that comes off the roof is being held in the ground rather than just going right into the waterways of the community. And finally, rainwater terracing is another way to do it, on just the topography of your lot. You could do rainwater terracing with stones. So all of these are different ways to utilize this program to allow us to help you financially pay for this work to capture and hold rainwater and make the most use of it. The final option that can be used in this Waterwise Rainscape program is porous pavement. And this could include either porous concrete on the right there. It's a special type of concrete that has spaces between the different aggregate pieces that allow water to flow through it. So unlike what you may see in commercial parking lots or other places where after a big rain, water's just pooling all around until it evaporates, this porous pavement will actually allow the water to go through it and infiltrate into the ground. Or pavers on the left-hand side, you see there, that are leaving space between the pavers for the water to infiltrate into the ground. So that also is eligible for this Waterwise Rainscape program. This fourth program here, Landscape Survival Tools. If you don't want to do barrels, or if you don't want to alter your landscape to include rain garden, swales or berms or what have you, there's still great ways to ensure that your plants are getting the most help that they can get during this dry, hot summer. And these tools include mulch, compost, and aerating your lawn. And Awesome Water will help provide funding for all three types of these different activities. In terms of how it works with this Landscape Survival Tool program, you buy the landscape materials over a minimum amount. There are minimum amounts that I'll talk about in just a moment. Keep the receipts, install the mulch or the compost or undertake the aeration in your yard, take photos of it, and then send them in to us. And then we'll send you back the reimbursement check. In terms of minimum amounts, I mentioned there, compost, we offer a rebate of $50 for 2 cubic yards of compost, $40 for 2 cubic yards of mulch, and then aeration services, even rental of aeration for your lawn, we have a $30 rebate. So different ways that we can help your yard, your landscape survive this hot summer heat. Some of the benefits, of course, compost. Many of you may be master gardeners or very interested in your landscape, so you are probably very familiar with the benefits of these different types of tools, landscape survival tools. Certainly compost allows the soil and the plants to hold more water. Mulch reduces the amount of water that evaporates off the soil, reducing the amount of water that your plants need, particularly as we get into the summer. and there's more heat, more sunlight, and there will be the same amount of watering that you can do, making sure your plants, your landscapes hold that water the best that it can is becoming very important. And then finally, turf aeration is a benefit to your lawn simply because it allows more air and water to get further down into past the grass and into the soil, which will allow the soil to develop deeper roots and newer roots. So helping your lawn make the most of whatever water it can get. So the fifth program here is the irrigation rebate. So if you do have an irrigation system, after you're trying to make sure that your landscape is utilizing the water the best that it can, there are opportunities to upgrade your irrigation system. Maximum of $1,000 there. These are for existing irrigation systems only. It's not a rebate program to help buy a new irrigation system, but to make existing irrigation systems better. It can be the homeowner or a licensed irrigator to do the work, and receipts must be itemized with labor and parts separated. Both can be part of the rebate, but the receipts, we ask to have an itemized receipt, just keeping those separated. And one thing to note, we ask you you need to submit the application within 30 days of the work. So the next few slides just have some examples of what could be done to upgrade irrigation systems and the type of rebates that we have in particular. You could convert from a spray to a multi-stream rotor nozzle. You can convert a station to drip, as was mentioned before, rebate $50. You can install with your system rain or soil moisture sensors also, so that your system knows when the landscape or the lawn needs to be irrigated. A few other options that could be done for your irrigation system. Pressure regulating valve can be installed for your entire system, as well as pressure regulating components. In areas with high pressure, that can really waste a lot of water through irrigation systems, because if the water is going through the irrigation system at a higher than needed or higher than recommended rate, it will tend to mist a lot of that water, and a lot of that water will be lost, particularly if it's breezy in the morning or through evaporation. So making sure you have an optimal pressure going through your system is very important. So that's why we try to support pressure regulating devices. If you no longer want to irrigate an area, you can cap that station, and we have a rebate for that. And finally, you can convert your spray heads from 2 or 4 inch pop-up to a 6 inch heads. 6 inch heads can save water by being above the grass rather than being deflected. So we do offer a rebate for 6 inch heads, those taller heads. But if you don't have an irrigation system, and not everyone has an automatic irrigation system, but may still want to water throughout this summer to help their landscapes make it through the year, you can do it with hose end irrigation. And as we mentioned earlier, under year-round restrictions and these stage 1 drought restrictions, automatic irrigation systems can water 1 day a week, but hose end irrigation can take place 2 days a week. And to help customers that do not have automatic irrigation systems, we do offer a rebate for hose end timers that you can get anyone, Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, you order them offline, it doesn't matter. We offer a rebate for those. But over the last 3 months, I think beginning in February, we've been partnering with Austin Energy as part of their instant savings program. And we're kind of dipping our toe into this with the pilot program in which Austin Water is offering a $5 instant savings for hose and timers at 5 Home Depots within Austin. So if you go to Home Depot in Austin and you go to the hose timer section, you should see a sign there in which the prices of these hose timers are reduced $5. And we're instituting that in lieu of a rebate to try to help customers and to see how that works in terms of getting these devices out and used for those who do not have automatic irrigation systems. One last program that I wanted to talk about in terms of rebates is what's called laundry to landscape rebate. This is a program which rebates funding to Austin customers for the installation of equipment to utilize their gray water. And gray water is water that has gone through the dishwasher or a sink. Gray water is not water that's being flushed down your toilet. So just to be clear about that, this is gray water, and it's most likely used from washing machines, as you see in the picture there. Washing machine water can be utilized for irrigation purposes, as you see there, where it comes out of the washing machine and then goes down into the landscape in a drip line to water plants and the tree, as you see in the picture there. So we offer a rebate for this for homeowners who want to utilize their gray water in watering their plants. And then finally, this is not necessarily a rebate. These are just free materials that we have at Austin Water, and we distribute to any customers who want them. Soil moisture meters, we have a couple of those. I'm not sure we have frogs in stock right now. We just have the ladybugs. But then there's also sunlight calculators that are checked out at the library, hose end meters, as opposed to the timers that I mentioned before, but hose end meters if you wanted to set how much was going through as opposed to a time. And then we have a number of things that we just give out here at the office, and they can be picked up here at the office, including shower heads, faucet aerators, and toilet leak detection tabs. These are things that could be done, be in-house rather than the landscape, but I just wanted to mention those because we do have these free materials to all Austin Water customers, as well as customers of our wholesale utilities. So with that, Daphne, I believe we're ready for a short break and then some questions.
That's right, everyone. So we'll take a very quick 3-minute break, give you time to grab some water or use the restroom real quick, as well as our speakers and our panel and myself. We'll see you guys back here at 10:53. And remember, put your questions in the Q&A and we'll pose those after the break. All right, welcome back, everyone. We have a few questions, Kevin. Looping back to the first part of your program, how does water conservation affect the hydrologic cycle, and does it increase the heat island effect?
I guess I'm assuming that the question is if, in terms of using less water in the landscape.
Yes.
Well, it is true that if we sprayed water all over across the entire metro area, it might be it might be cooler. However, we have to balance that out with the use of water. So it's important to have landscapes, trees, lawns, what have you, to help mitigate some of that heat item effect. But we want to utilize those tools, the lawns, trees, plants, what have you, with the best use of water. We don't want to overwater them. We want to give them just enough water for them to survive tough times and hopefully thrive in regular times. But we want to make sure that we're not watering, we're not wasting the water. And that's one of the reasons that we, in that Waterwise landscape program I mentioned, we're not supporting the use of astroturf, or I guess artificial turf, or just complete rock beds, which granted would save water. One could not deny they would save water, but they would contribute to the heat island effect, and that's something we don't want to do. So we want to use the water as wisely as we can.
That's a very good point, because you mentioned in the landscape rebate and the replacing of turf with native plants, that's about plant cover. There's a certain percentage that has to be plant cover in that replacement system for the turf, because you do want plants in the landscape. Even though plants use water, they do also give us benefit. So we want to kind of find that delicate balance between water used in the landscape while conserving water and having some of the benefits, and kind of just managing all of that situation as best we can. We have a question about soap in gray water. So the soap remnants in the acceptable gray water and have that harms plants. We used to have higher sulfates in our cleaning products. I know a lot of that's changed, but how does that affect our gray water and the health of the plant when that water is used on the plant?
Right. Once one is very interested in this laundry landscape, that is definitely something they would have to consider, what they're putting into their laundry. Some laundry detergents, fabric softeners may not be appropriate if you want to go that way. So it is certainly something that a commitment to use that, to utilize that source of water to help your plants. It'll be nearly year round, but that is something to consider.
Definitely. And, I spent the early decade of my career in El Paso, where there was a very extensive commercial use of gray water on our golf courses in that community. And we very quickly learned, or what golf course managers very quickly learned, was that, yes, that gray water could be used on turf pretty successfully. It infiltrated into the soil pretty quickly, but that gray water was pretty high in salt. And when those big rotary sprinklers shot that water way far across the golf course to water large areas, and they happened to hit a pine tree, that where that salty water hit that pine tree, it did damage the tree. So you're right. The question is correct to point out that there can be things that are in gray water that can be harmful to plants. So it is something that needs to be managed and thought through prior to doing that, and what plants you have in your landscape that will take that water. Very good point. Another one, how do the toilet leak detectors work? The kits that you mentioned.
The ones we have are just very simple dye tablets, where you put them in the tank. I think it's blue. You put it in the tank, and if between flushes you see blue seeping in, then you got a leak in there. So they're just the simple dye tablets.
Okay, so they do not a very sophisticated step, but something that is helpful.
Right.
And last one we'll take before we move back into your program, of all the tools that you mentioned for conservation that are available for homeowners to take advantage of, is there one or two that you consider most important for people just starting out, maybe to try to conserve more water?
I would say certainly the rain barrels are kind of a gateway item, where it just makes you cognizant of the natural rainfall that you receive and utilizing that. In terms of, effectiveness, in terms of saving water, if you have an irrigation system, I think the first step is to actually be aware of how much you're using. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But that's kind of the first step. But then the second step is really to making sure you're fine tuning that irrigation system as best you can, because automatic irrigation systems do a great job of irrigating our landscape. But if they have a leak or if there's a problem, they do a great job of wasting water also. So I would say probably those two things. First, if you want to kind of put your toe into it, a rain barrel is good, and we pay for half of it. And then if you're in the irrigation system.
I have a hose-in timer and I love it. I have it hooked up to my drip hose in my bed that is normally in shade most of the year, but in the summer, due to the way the sun moves, my shady bed is really baking hot for about 2 months of the year. And so I've got a timer hooked up to the soaker hose in that bed where I can water that section more, but also conserve water in that section. And I will never go back. I love it.
Oh, good.
All right. Back to your presentation. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, so the final section in the presentation, tomorrow's landscape irrigation. I wanted to touch on a few things that we're doing here at Austin Water and within the city of Austin that will have an impact on landscape going into the future, not only for today's residents, but also for the residents that will receive tomorrow and the next day and what have you, as Austin is a fast-growing city. The first thing I want to talk about is just to make sure all of you are aware of a big endeavor that Austin Water is undertaking entitled My ATX Water. And essentially, these are smart meters that are being applied to the water line. Our electrical meters, our power line meters, for quite a while now, they've had smart meters that could tell you how much electricity you're using at any point in the day. But for water, we're just kind of catching up here, and we are taking this big step of installing new smart meters into all of the customers that we have here at Austin Water. Now, we've had a pilot program, but we really kind of got started last year, and we're trying to replace about 1,000 smart meters a month, maybe hopefully getting a little more than that, which seems like a lot. And it is a lot of work to replace 1,000 meters a week. But when you realize that Austin Water has over 200,000 residential customers, and then commercial customers in addition to that, you can see that it is quite a job to replace all of these meters. So when they are replaced, the new meter and the transmitter will be in the existing box generally. They'll measure the water as it goes through on an hourly basis and then transmit that information into a network that Austin Water can collect and view. But even more importantly, it will allow Austin Water customers to go into the portal and to see exactly how much water they're using. So this can be very important, particularly if you have landscaping and whether an irrigation system or a hose-in timer or what have you. Sometimes it's hard to realize, as I mentioned before, how much water you're actually using. You may see it at the end of the month, but you may not see just how much of an impact irrigation has on it. So this will allow customers to go into the portal and to see pretty specifically when they are using a lot of water. And that's generally corresponding to irrigation times. So the benefits of this really are water usage, being able to view water usage, leak alerts. I'll talk about those in a moment, and then suggested rebates and actions through this portal. So once the person gets a meter and they go into the portal, this is an example of what they may see regarding their water use in this portal. You can see it daily. In this particular case, I just grabbed this as a screenshot out of our portal. You know, this particular individual actually has a lot of water use that's identified by the system as timed irrigation. Well, that's true. I don't know this customer or what have you if it's not, but it gives you an indication of what you can see in this portal when you use it. In addition, you can see that same information in a slightly different way by the system adding on historical other information. You see in this chart, the vertical bars are the gallons per day being used on average at different points in the year. And then you can see the temperature in that, I guess it's khaki area, you know, going up and down. You can see that precipitation, when the precipitation is high, when it's low over that past year. So you can also gauge, if you're looking at your water use and you're trying to think, why did this go up? Am I using the right amount of water? You can also look at it by comparing to precipitation and temperature, particularly for landscape irrigation. So this is another tool that comes from this MyATX water system, and you can view through this portal. So again, if you have received one of these meters, MyATX water meters, one of these smart meters, really encourage you to go online and set up your portal so you can view this information. Now, granted, everyone may not view it. I don't even view my water use every day. But it's good to be able to see that in case you're wondering about your use or you see a high bill or what have you. The second great benefit of these smart meters is that they can be a great tool to catch leaks. Now, if you have a leak in your house, you may eventually see it, and you may see it sooner than you ever imagined. It may not be what you want to see. But leaks out in irrigation systems can often go for quite a while before we realize it, because maybe the irrigation system's running while we're sleeping. And so we don't see a broken head or what have you, just burbling out water, or a drip system that is not working well. And we don't notice it because it's under the mulch or at night. So this system, once you have your AMI meter, will alert you for potential leaks. And the leak alert metrics that the system currently has is if your house has a water use of 7 gallons per hour or more over 36 hours, it will send you a leak and of course a burst. And if it's 120 gallons per hour over 8 hours, it will send you also another alert letting you know about this. Now, these metrics, they're more of an art than a science on how much you want to dial it down. Some people may have told us, man, I'm glad you told us about the leak, but I wish you would have told me, you know, yesterday or what have you. But there's a fine balance between leaks that you can find, how early you want to notify people. So that's where we're still dialing in on that. But we know from feedback from customers that everyone is glad to learn about a leak that they can address. And this is something you could see on your dashboard also, just going back to some of those. You could see where it's possible leak, that orange color, I think you describe it as, the system shows as a possible leak when you look back at your data. And as I mentioned, leak notifications, you get through this through either email or text, and you can decide on how you want to receive leak alerts in your portal. You'll get some of this. And I've had a number of friends and coworkers who live in the Austin area that have received leak alerts. And they always found a great help to addressing that and to taking care of it sooner rather than later. And in addition to the leak alert, you may have noticed, go back just a moment, up on the top of that leak alert there, just under that top continuous water bar, there's a click for investigate possible leaks. That's often the question. Someone gets these leak alerts and they say, what do I do now? Well, clicking on that link takes you to a number of different screens that will help you identify where it is and to address the different leaks, whether it's through toilets or fixtures or irrigation systems there. So it really helps, and customers and those who receive it in the future, it will really help them address these leaks. And then finally, this MyATX water portal going forward is really going to evolve into having suggested actions and rebates. Currently, we have a number of suggested recommendations for actions and potential savings, how much you might save, whether that's low water use plants or mulch. But the intent is going forward is to link people's portals to the actual rebates that they might apply for, to make that more seamless as we go forward in the future, understanding your water and then understanding what you can do to save water, whether it's with the city's help through a rebate program or even on your own. So that's what Austin Water is doing with the MyATX water. This last section, I want to really ask you to look forward into the future with me. And touching on the Austin's Water Forward Plan. If you're not familiar with it, this was a water supply plan that was approved by City Council back in 2018. And it's, as you see there, it's a 100-year water supply. So the city and Austin Water are really looking out long ways into the future regarding how we can be sustainable, how we can have a water supply going forward. As that next bullet points out, how we can have water during a drought, looking at the worst case scenarios and utilizing a number of different tools to meet these supplies. Most predominantly in this case, reuse and water conservation. So this plan is established going forward. Austin Water is implementing this plan. And one of the things that the City Council asked Austin Water to do this last October was to expedite one of the strategies in that water forward plan called Landscape Transformation Ordinance. This strategy was initially expected to be completed in 2025, but as I mentioned, Austin City Council, recognizing the need for Austin become more sustainable, ask us to expedite the implementation of this. This strategy was envisioned to be a way in which we transition new homes, new single-family homes, from the traditional landscaping practices to new landscapes. As they mentioned here, I'll read this off. Traditional landscaping practices that to those that rely on regionally appropriate plants and have reduced supplemental water needs with an emphasis on landscape function. So recognizing the functions of the landscape, both for heat island, but also aesthetics and enjoyment and recreation, what have you, but transforming the landscape such that it will be using less water. Because one of the things that was noted in the Water Forward Plan is that in order for Austin Water to be a sustainable community, while still relying primarily on the Highland Lakes for our supply, each Austin Water resident is going to have to use a little less water next year than they used in the previous year. Going forward in time, we are all going to have to be more efficient because we're going to be getting more and more people into the city of Austin. So we're going to have to learn how to become more and more efficient And new residents are going to have to use less water than the current residents in order to drive that average water use down. So this is one of the strategies that we are currently working on. And as you see on the bullet there, it could include lawn or grass or irrigation limitations. Why do we need an ordinance? I kind of went into some of these different bullets. First of all, population is increasing. So we're getting more people, more businesses, but pretty much the same amount of water from the Highland Lakes. It's noted that property and yard sizes, if you've gone to new subdivisions, they're generally trending downward. However, on the other side, the percent of new homes that have automatic irrigation systems is increasing. It's often standard in some areas. And the amount of water used per square foot landscaping is also increasing. So even though yard sizes may be getting smaller, we're still using more water because one, we're using automatic irrigation systems more widely, and we're using more per square foot. So that's why we need to look into a landscape transformation project. Expected timeline. There's a lot of text and words here, and generally they're small, but I just wanted to kind of give you this as a brief description. We kind of started this project as staff back in October of last year, and beginning in February, we've had a number of public meetings and stakeholder meetings throughout this spring. We have one more stakeholder meeting that'll take place in the middle of June. But then we're going to take all those ideas, and then we'll be over the summer drafting language out that are recommendations in terms of how to change landscapes to be more water efficient for new single family homes. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before. Just to clarify, these ideas are not for existing homeowners with existing landscapes and existing irrigation systems. These are proposed ideas for new homeowners as new homes are built within Austin. So I just wanted to make that clear. We'll be putting our ideas out this fall, again, re-engaging with stakeholders, and then taking to City Council probably beginning of early next year in 2023. That's kind of where we are now, that red diamond there. What I would like everyone's input on here is a Speak Up Austin page that we have. And as Daphne mentioned, there will be a link to that in the notes or what you received later. But I mentioned that we have been talking to stakeholders in public meetings and stakeholder meetings. But this is an opportunity for anyone to go on to the Speak Up Austin page to learn about our endeavors to develop irrigation and landscape ordinance, and to leave comments and to get information about going forward. And there is a survey that is still up that I invite everyone to respond to this survey. Speak Up Austin, I think it has about 10 questions or so. So it's not too long. But what I'd like to do in these last number of slides is to go some of the initial responses that we've received from people in the public to this survey. But you still have time to contribute to the survey, and we will be looking at all the answers when we get done and we close the survey. Probably either the end of, I'd say even the end of this week or maybe the end of next week. I'm not sure which one, but there's still time for anyone to do this survey. Some of the responses that we've received so far from the surveys, and these are responses we received about a month ago. Over 200 people have contributed to this survey so far. These aren't the end numbers, as I mentioned. We will relook at all the numbers when we close the survey by the end of this week or even next week or so. But it gives you an idea of what people think, and we invite you to let us know what you think also. These aren't all the questions, but I just wanted to share with you the results of some of these questions. Question 2 in the survey essentially asks, should there be a list of allowed plants and grasses? And see there, well, 20%, 1 out of 5 said no, there shouldn't be a list of allowed plants or grasses that could be used in new residential properties. Probably 70% said that there, yes, there should be a mandatory list of grasses or plants that could be used for new residential properties. Question 3, when we ask people, should we limit the area of turf grass on new residential properties? Turf grass could be in 75% of the irrigatable area or 50% or what have you. Should we limit the amount of turf grass? 66%, 2/3 said yes, although it was a bit nuanced there with, you can see with the different shades of the blue pieces of pie. Some just said yes, and some said if it was large enough, some as long as it is functional. 30% said no, there should be no limit to grasses. Question 4, we asked, should we limit the size of irrigation systems? First it was turf, and the last question, this is, should we limit the size of irrigation systems? 60% said yes, we should. Although again, you can see 17% said only for large properties, 29% said no, and then there are always a few opportunities for others. Question 5, we asked the respondents, should we increase the irrigation standards? When new houses have new irrigation systems, should we up the standards of those systems to improve efficiency? 85% said yes. Of course, some of them said 44%, 45% said, yeah, it has to be cost effective also. So overall, the vast majority said yes, with some nuances. Question 6, should we require landscape or irrigation plans to be submitted for review and approval prior to installations? So this is certainly affect the builders, asking them to submit the plans beforehand for approval. 40% said no. The yes was a bit of a mix, about a third saying both landscape and irrigation plans, a few saying only landscape, some 20% saying only irrigation plans. So that was a bit mixed. Question 4, asking which, in your opinion, affordability versus protecting our water supply. What are people's opinions on balancing those two things? Affordability, which we all know is a big topic here in Austin, versus protecting our water supplies, which again is a very popular notion there. 10%, the yellow piece of pie, saying that affordability is more important than protecting water supply. Not that it's not important, but new conservation standards. Affordability is more important than new conservation standards. 34%, 35% said protecting our water supply was more important than new conservation standards. And then 55%, over half of the people said it should really be a balance of affordability versus new conservation standards. So that's what we received from the public, from the Speak Up Austin page. Again, please go on and do that survey. If you're interested, we'd love to see what people say, the public. In addition to simply receiving, not simply, but in addition to receiving feedback from the public through that survey, we've also had a number of meetings with city stakeholders, because we don't want to get into the situation where the left hand of the city doesn't know what the right hand of the city is doing. We don't want to be mucking up programs and processes by other city departments, such as development services who are doing inspections, watershed protection that deals with stormwater and runoff, and even Austin Energy and sustainability, as well as parks and wildlife. So we've been working with all of these different City of Austin areas or departments to make sure that we will put out something that does not work against them. And we've been talking to external stakeholders. These include home builders, irrigators, nursery and landscape, and turf grass producers. Some of the things that we've heard back from them, particularly home builders. Home builders want to see water savings numbers. They want to see if you're going to do anything, how much are you actually going to be saving? And which is not an unreasonable request. And that is something that we will be working on in anything we put out is if we do this, what's going to be the result? As they like incentives as opposed to regulations as an idea. But primarily, they're more concerned about project delays. If there are extra inspections or plan reviews, getting new homes through the Austin development process can be challenging. In any case, they don't want to add to that. As I mentioned, we spoke to irrigation professionals. Irrigation professionals that we spoke to like the idea of raising the bar on who's putting these in. By, I guess, keeping track, or I wouldn't say necessarily cracking down, but enforcing the requirements for certified irrigators to put these in, as well as non-licensed irrigation systems. They definitely support the idea of high efficiency irrigation systems. The final bullet talking about certain water budgets for when installing. So this is somewhat of a complicated idea, but one in which you might say for a single family lot of this particular size, you can use X number of gallons in the landscape and they'll design an irrigation system and landscape to meet those water needs. We also talked to turf grass producers. They didn't want us to include any particular type of turf grass, as they would be quick to mention different types of grass have advantages in different areas, the shade areas, high sun areas, what have you. And they note the high carbon sequestration rate of grass, as well as they've noted the effect on cooling a community. And they also mentioned that they would suggest delayed implementation because it takes time to grow grass, particularly if you're changing one type to another for builders. Some of the examples of other cities in Texas in regards to how they deal with irrigation systems. Up in North Texas, Frisco, they actually do plan review and post-installation inspections for all single-family homes for the irrigation systems. So we've spoken with them. We're going to be working more with them to determine what works well for them and what does not. They also allow homeowners to get a free irrigation check within 45 days of installation. So the idea being up in Frisco, they want to start out homeowners in the best situation possible for irrigation. They want to have a system that's put in well, it's inspected, and sometimes homeowners just need a little bit of assistance right off the bat in terms of scheduling, generally, to set up their system well. New Braunfels, just to the south of us, they have separate irrigation meters for all their single-family homes, which is not something we have in Austin. And they have requirements for new home builders to have Waterwise landscaping packages available if homeowners want to buy that. And they need to have one of their mobile homes showing off these Waterwise landscape packages. So just a few slides left here. I wanted to talk about some of the ideas that we have going forward. And this may trigger, something in your mind which you want to give us comments on that Speak Up Austin page, or attend a future public meeting. Some of the options, that are being considered in regards to irrigation going forward include enhanced post-installation inspections, require specific irrigation components, whether those be pressure regulating valves or pressure regulating heads or 6-inch heads or what have you, specific components that will save water. Homeowner education, as I mentioned, pressure reduction devices, possibly limiting irrigated area, and then plan review. Just going back to landscaping, some of the ideas that may be included in this landscape transformation strategy that we'll be working to put together includes requiring a landscape plan to be submitted with building plans, asking model homes and new subdivisions to adopt water-saving landscaping to show people what could be done, limiting turf area, and then soil requirements in terms of the depth of soil required for new homes. So that's the end of this section. I wanted to just give you two things that Austin Water is working on that we'd like your input on, particularly that water transformation, landscape transformation ordinance going forward. The smart meters, if you're getting a smart meter, please sign up for the portal so you can get a better idea of how much you're using, and you can be alerted for any leaks. And then finally, that landscape transformation, please give us any feedback that you might have about that. My contact information is on the screen there. I'll leave up for a little bit, and you're welcome to contact me and answer your questions or put you in touch with any of our experts. Daphne.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. Great overview, sort of a skimming the surface into a deep dive of water conservation and some Austin Water strategies for doing that, and just some of the ins and outs of that. So we do have a few more questions here that I'll pose. One participant asked about dealing with their HOA and installing some native plants. A lot of HOAs have the requirement for so many trees and so much grass, and our state legislature enacted some laws that now have an effect on that. So we will send out that link, but I was curious if you had any thoughts on that with kind of navigating the HOA situation and native plants.
That'll definitely be something we will have to deal with, particularly if we're limiting turf or even limiting irrigation systems, the size of irrigation systems. We haven't yet had a chance to really engage with the HOA or their community group. I think once we put out, I think we'll certainly hear from them, but we'll certainly need to adapt what we put out in terms of any limitations on what HOAs are requiring people to do, because we don't want to put people in a bind of either doing what the city says or doing what the HOA says, because we don't want to put them between a rock and a hard place. That's a good question.
I moved here back to Austin. I was in Austin in college, but I moved back to here 13 years ago, and so my neighborhood was new at that time. And my HOA surprisingly does not have any requirements for any certain amount of turf in the front or any certain number of trees. They just specified that the landscape has to be nicely maintained, and that if you have grass, it can't be over a certain height. So I think some of those things are reasonable expectations, but that might, like you say, maybe meeting an HOA halfway to decide, what's an acceptable native plant. Because what I like to point out, usually when we talk about turf grass, and how many people want to take out all of their turf and replace it with native plants because they can be managed to use less water than turf if they're managed properly. But plants require a different type of maintenance than a lawn does. So what I don't want people to jump into is replacing their landscape with native plants and then not doing the maintenance, the pruning of the perennials back to the ground every year, or not understanding the maintenance before they make the commitment to plants that need to be pruned and watered differently and maintained differently. So as you say, it's a lot about education and helping people understand what they're getting themselves into so they don't have regret when they get down that road with a different set of problems than a water use problem. And you know, just to point out that turf grasses can go dormant. We can allow them to go dormant in the summer by really severely restricting their water. So it's keeping their root mass alive so they can reemerge again when they get rainfall. And so really that focus on education and helping people make a well-informed decision. I think that's what Awesome Water is all about as well. And just helping people make the right decision for themselves in their own situation. And as I said, we will send out that link to the state law, the new laws in effect from our state legislature on HOA and how they can or can't regulate what's in your landscape. Okay, we have a couple more questions. And one is about water barrels and how, or rainwater harvesting barrels, and how they do harvest water. They keep that water from going back into the hydrologic cycle into our groundwater system. And you know, states out west, many of them don't allow rainwater barrels. So a lot of people move here, you know, say from California or Colorado, and get confused that we actually encourage rainwater barrels. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, certainly, you know, Colorado is an instance where in the past it had been essentially illegal to capture rainwater. I believe that has been changed. But that is a question on capturing rainwater. Yes, we can capture rainwater here in Texas. It's a good idea to capture it and keep it and use it. You know, most likely that water that you captured, it will go back into the ground if you use it. So it's a good instance of how to use that and spread it out.
Yeah, and I would like to point out not just harvesting rainwater, harvesting water as rain in your landscape, but one policy that I implemented, personal policy, back in the original, when I moved here in 2009, very quickly thereafter was the 2011 really mega hot summer and drought. And so I started keeping a bucket near my shower where I capture the water while it's getting hot. And then some also while I shower. And then I picked out a really cute little watering can that I keep by my kitchen sink. So I never allow any water just to go down the drain while it's trying to get hot. I'm very more conserving in my house so that I can give that special plant in my landscape. Yeah, I can't water my yard with my 5 gallons a day that I harvest in my house, but if I have a tree that I'm trying to nurse along through the hot of the summer or some other special plant or house plants, I have water that I can do that with without actually turning on an irrigation system. So that's another strategy I'd like to share with people. And then just one more question about irrigation systems and installing them and some of the rules surrounding that. And that is that whole part of our state's rules and laws is managed by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. But kind of locally, what are outside of those state regulations where, you know, the state says that a homeowner, if you're on your own landscape, you can install an irrigation system without a license, an irrigator's license. So, but there is a certain amount of knowledge that you need to do that. I'm not suggesting that people go out and do that on their own. But if someone, you know, has some classes or what part of that should they, you know, first of all, definitely the city requires permits for that. So what are those permitting processes and how do people get involved in that permitting process with the city? Where do they go to get that permit to install an irrigation system, maybe a drip system for their beds? For sure, I know that you guys want to be very involved in the installation of a backflow prevention device. So just kind of talk us through some things that homeowners really want to be cognizant of before they go down the road of installing an irrigation system themselves. Is that something they're thinking of doing?
Right. Yeah, and certainly, as you mentioned, there is a permit that people apply for, City of Austin website. I don't remember the website offhand, I admit, but if someone could Google it, yeah, it's on the City of Austin website. And for automatic irrigation systems, there is that requirement for, you know, backflow prevention devices. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're working with a certified irrigation installer, they should be addressing this or looking at this, but that pressure is also very important when you're putting that in. how much pressure you have. If you're looking at it, if you live in a very high pressure area, that's going to push a lot of water through your irrigation system. And it can really result in some wasted water through misting and overspray, what have you. So those are three things to look into for installing an irrigation system. You know, beyond that, I have to admit, I'm not an irrigation installer, but we do have some on staff. So anyone is welcome to contact me, and I can put you in touch with our irrigators. We have a lot of irrigation installers, certified irrigation installers, and we can help walk anyone through what they should be cognizant of.
That's a great point. Thank you for that insight. And then just the last question I want to touch on is the smart irrigation controllers, you know, the ones that have kind of a little mini weather station built in, and they read the weather and adjust, called smart controllers. Is there any movement at the City of Austin to have those be utilized more widely? I know it is a requirement that systems have to have a rain sensor installed. If you have an automatic irrigation system, it has to have a rain sensor. That's a state requirement. But does the City of Austin have any interest in, you know, getting people to move to more smart controllers that are weather-based, or do those completely not really in line with the 1 day a week and the way that we need to maintain that 1 day a week to try to cut back on water and make it easy for, you know, code compliance officers to come around and make sure that we're all kind of following the rules? Can you kind of touch on smart controllers?
Right. I mean, there's certainly a lot of smart controllers out there, and they have a lot of features that can be used in terms of how you can access them, program them, weather modifications, what have you. But also, as you mentioned, here in Austin, we just have 1 day a week. So it doesn't really matter how smart the meter necessarily is. Sometimes you still have 1 day a week. So the smart meters really aren't as smart controllers, rather, are not really as useful here in Austin as they may be other cities that have a much more wide open watering schedule. So there's no movement in Austin Water to, rebate or necessarily push the smart irrigation controllers due to that 1 day a week. If you have 1 day a week and your landscape needs to be watered, you should water that 1 day a week.
Yeah, I think that's a delicate balancing act, as everything on this topic is. It's kind of a challenge to make such a broad set of rules that everyone needs to follow to conserve, but it's kind of what we need to do to get through a hard period. And then if we keep that in mind when we move back and we're not under as strict restrictions anymore and conserve water, then maybe we all pull together and get through the crisis at the moment. All right. Unfortunately, we're not going to solve that issue today, but we thank you for being with us today, Kevin. It's been really informative talking with you, hearing from you from Austin Water today, and I appreciate your time. And thank you to our attendees for participating. Very soon, you'll receive an extensive email from us, including a link to a short survey. And we'd really appreciate if you filled that survey out. Your feedback helps to ensure that Extension can continue to offer these types of valuable programs in the future. That email will also include a link to access the recording of today's session, a list of resources for further study, and links to any websites or source material listed by the speaker, along with information on how to contact our gardening helpline and how to subscribe to notifications for future seminars in our gardening series here at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Until next time, thank you for joining us and happy gardening.